Please share the information provided in this video. Always remember that a crucial part of removing a person's confusion is understanding his or her unique source of it. Now, this video is how does the evidence for the problem tell us that most major religions and worldviews are wrong. Now, if you don't understand what I mean by the problem, this video is kind of a follow-up to something I mentioned in a previous video called How Do We Know the Christian Religion is True? And in that video I mentioned that something, along those lines. And so we're going to assume you've watched that video. And if you haven't watched it, click here and go back and watch it. Now, we'll just go through 4 basic views. And we're going to, the things, the proofs and the arguments and the reasons for believing what we said, in the previous video. We're going to just transplant them here. So the 4 views we'll deal with: atheism, which is not really a worldview, but it's an essential part of a lot of worldviews, and Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam. So just atheism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. We'll just stick with those 4 and demonstrate that they cannot be true. So, first of all, in the previous video, we proved that there must exist a God, an all-powerful, all-knowing being who's perfectly good. So, therefore, atheism cannot be true. That's the easiest one. Now, Hinduism tells us that God was once this impersonal force, and it sort of forgot how to be itself and separated out into all of us, and that we are all God. It's what we call pantheistic. All, pan, the Greek, all, theos, God. So all is God. Even the grasshopper, you, the cow, every form of life. We reincarnate as something else, but we all are trying to get back to the Brahman, or the impersonal absolute. The fundamental flaw here is that from the previous video we proved that God is a perfectly good being, therefore he cannot be evil. And he's the source of all goodness itself, and goodness and morality is based on and what God is. So that rules that one out. Buddhism represented a break with Hinduism, where essentially what they were trying to do was get away from this pursuit of, rebirth and death and rebirth and death, and get out of that whole cycle and get out, away outside of the Hindu system. So they kind of accepted a lot of what the Hindu system said as true, but it was a way to get out of it. And so essentially it's what we call non-theistic. In other words, yeah, there is a God or there isn't a God. You can believe there is or there isn't in Buddhism, but ultimately God doesn't matter. Now again, going back to the previous video, God must matter, because God is the source of all existence, and more importantly, he determines good and evil. It's based in his existence, in who and what he is. Therefore, he is the only thing that ultimately matters, and everything else matters because of him. So Buddhism's wrong. And then Islam. And Islam teaches that, very similar to Christianity and Judaism, there was a God, and he's perfect and good in every way. So check there. Created humans, check there. Humans are evil, check there. Okay, so good God, evil humans. But then it differs with Christianity on the solution to the problem. Christianity teaches that God became one of us, the incarnation, and died to be punished in our place, the crucifixion, and then rose again from the dead, the resurrection. Islam denies the incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which are fundamental to Christianity. And so what does it provide in the place of that? Simply put, God is just going to let you off the hook. It's a simple thing for God to forgive. He doesn't need anyone to bear the punishment. And, he just says, okay, whatever, if you're trying to do good, I'll forgive you. The fundamental problem with Islam is that God, if he is the source of all goodness and perfectly good, then he must be maximally good. His goodness must be maxed out. There must be no greater level of goodness. So that means that his standards are maximally strict because he's a maximally good or moral being. He is maximally hard on evil. So or you could say his standards of goodness are maximally high. And they're not watered down in any way. And that's the problem with Islam. God says, well, there doesn't have to be any punishment as long as you don't go too far with it. And they're pretty clear on that. It's just, if you sin, it's okay as long as you don't go too far with it. But it doesn't make sense for a God who's a perfectly good being to be kind of so concerned about evil. It makes more sense for him to be maximally strict or maximally moral and take sin more seriously. So the Christian God takes sin more seriously. He considers it more important. He considers our actions more important than the Muslim God who says, I'll just ignore and forget about. The interesting thing is that the Christian God also offers the maximal level of hope, because to get right, he's provided everything. You just have to believe in Jesus Christ. So with the Christian God, any sin, you deserve to go to hell, but Christ has died in your place. And if you just believe, then you got the maximal level of hope. With the Muslim God, hope isn't necessarily there, because it's just a question of God weighing your life and the goods versus the bads at the end. So he doesn't provide the maximal level of hope, and he doesn't provide the maximal level of strictness with good and evil. He just kind of doesn't care about a lot of it. And that doesn't make sense with what we again proved about the perfectly good moral God. So I hope you found this video informative and enjoyable. Thank you for your time.